These are the scammers who don't care anything about how heartless their scams are. Let's get started with number 5, the homeless betrayer. Bookkeeper Darren Mackenzie stole $1.6 million from his employer and friend Manraj Singh Punni. Punni owned a chain of pharmacies, and when he learned that Mackenzie was homeless, he offered Mackenzie a place to live. The pair built a close and trusting relationship. Punni saw Mackenzie as a little brother and wanted to do what he could to help Mackenzie get back on his feet. Sadly, Punni learned that he didn't know Mackenzie at all. When one of Punni's employees came across invoices for Mackenzie's 3-bedroom home, the company opened an investigation. They discovered that Mackenzie was using company accounts to fund his house's construction and interior design work. Additionally, Mackenzie transferred money directly into his personal accounts and gave himself an unapproved raise. Mackenzie had been embezzling funds for almost 9 years when Punni learned of his betrayal. The $1.6 million that Mackenzie stole went towards lavish expenses, such as spending $370,000 on home renovations and luxury vacations from the UK to Las Vegas and New York. He treated himself to stays at 5-star London hotels, shopping trips, and luxury department stores like Harrods and Fortnum & Mason. Mackenzie also went on extravagant spending sprees, splurging on items like expensive watches such as Rolex and Tag Heuer, designer clothes, luggage, and homeware from brands like Louis Vuitton and Versace. For a formerly homeless guy, Mackenzie had expensive tastes. At the end of the investigation, Punni fired Mackenzie for his betrayal and pursued legal action. Mackenzie, being an apparently low-watt bulb, didn't seem to understand the severity of his situation. He was jobless, had spent most of the money he stole, and had lost access to his former company's money. When he needed a job reference, he reached out to Punni as though nothing had happened to see if he would be willing to give him one. Of course, that didn't happen. Punni will likely never get all his money back. During legal proceedings, the court heard that they would probably only be able to recover $33,000 from an auction as the rest of the stolen money was lost. Mackenzie pleaded guilty to fraud, and the judge sentenced him to 5 years and 8 months in jail. Maybe one of the guards will give him a letter of recommendation when he gets out. Number 4, the Black Widow Sisters. The Black Widows, a gang of sisters, married and went after unsuspecting men as part of an elaborate, sophisticated insurance scam based in El Salvador, which is Spanish for the Salvador. The sisters seduced eligible bachelors who wanted to move to the U.S. They arranged marriages of convenience, telling the bachelors that the marriage meant they would get U.S. passports. The sisters instructed the men to take out life insurance policies with their new wives as beneficiaries. Somehow, this wasn't a red flag. Once the men had the policies, they would marry one of the sisters. 2 or 3 weeks into the marriage, the women would then go after their husbands and collect the insurance money, which was up to $50,000. They looked for men with steady jobs and medium to high incomes. The sisters posed as domestic workers and told the men the women they recruited were U.S. citizens who could help them move to the United States. The sisters were Esmeralda Flores Acosta, Carla Jennifer Flores Acosta, Maria Cristiana Flores de Cruz, and Gabriela Guadalupe Flores, with Esmeralda being the leader of the group. The Black Widow sisters weren't the only women marrying men. They recruited other women by promising them jobs as domestic servants and would then threaten to go after them and their families if they refused to marry the men the sisters chose. Once the recruited women married one of the bachelors, the gang just went after their new husbands. The recruits were constantly afraid, and one successfully fled the sisters' house in El Salvador. The woman, referred to as Monica, alerted the police, reporting that she was forced to marry a man who the sisters later went after for his life insurance. Monica's escape was a pivotal moment in the Black Widow operation, and her testimony played a crucial role in building a case against the sisters. 2 of the sisters' female victims gave evidence central to the prosecution's case against the sisters. Speaking out against the sisters meant authorities had to put the victims under witness protection, which provided them with safety and support while they contributed crucial information to investigators. The youngest sister, Gabriella, married brother Toby, a famous TV televangelist and the founder of the largest evangelical church in El Salvador, Baptist Biblical Tabernacle. Brother Toby passed away at age 78, and the details surrounding his passing were suspicious. Investigators found that the autopsy revealed he had abnormally high levels of aluminum and lead in his blood. Brother Toby's health deteriorated when he married Gabriella. Given her criminal activities, people became suspicious of her and her sister's involvement. After all, the sisters looked for men whose life insurance would yield substantial payouts, making Brother Toby an appealing target. The sisters initially recruited Monica by offering her a job looking after 4 children in Esmeralda's home. Soon after the job started, the sisters threatened her with a gun and told her they would go after her and her family if she didn't marry the man they chose for her. Monica obeyed their demands and married a farmer named Melvin Ostmaro Reyes Rosa, who Esmeralda promised American citizenship. Monica kept working at Esmeralda's house after the wedding until October 7th, 2016, when Esmeralda informed her that her husband was gone. Esmeralda instructed Monica to go to the family's house and pretend she knew nothing of his death. Monica later identified her husband's body, and the sisters made her claim his life insurance, which was $57,000. Esmeralda then withdrew the money, spent roughly $20,000, and deposited the rest in a savings account, prompting Monica to flee. The sisters forced the other unnamed woman authorities placed under witness protection to marry Edgar Criona Hernandez. Shortly after the wedding, the sisters left him on the side of El Salvador's Oro Highway, then claimed his life insurance money and pension. Another woman the sisters recruited was Fatima, who they made marry a soldier. However, they didn't go after him as they feared authorities would investigate his passing more thoroughly due to his military status. But that was only a mild hiccup. The sisters forced Fatima to convince the soldier to leave the army so they could go after him without raising suspicion. After their husbands' passings, the sisters took some of the recruited women to Mexico and forced them into working for them, the type of work you can imagine. They recruited young women in universities and shopping malls, promising them a chance to live in the United States. Once the husbands were gone, the sisters exploited the women for their illicit activities in Mexico. Eventually, authorities had enough evidence against the sisters to arrest them. They charged the ringleader Esmeralda with charges ranging from human trafficking to fraud. She denied wrongdoing, of course, claiming she was a vehicle seller and a stylist who never worked from home. The other sisters and their accomplices all faced similar charges. Number 3. The Hurricane Chaser. Eric Zico, a 36-year-old man from Orlando, posed as a licensed contractor to scam an elderly victim after Hurricane Ian. Zico claimed to own E&Z U.S. Roofing and offered his services for $47,000. The elderly victim was a resident of the Bay Indies area of Venice, which was heavily affected after the hurricane. Most of the neighborhood was in disrepair, and while residents tried to rebuild, unlicensed contractors and scammers descended upon the area. Zico was one of them, pretending to be licensed while preying on vulnerable residents desperate to fix the damage to their properties. He requested a check for 50% of the work up front as a deposit, which his victim paid. However, his actions put him on the radar of a Venice police investigator. The number of people taking advantage of the situation in the Bay Indies area was so high that police and code enforcement made daily trips around the neighborhood to protect homeowners from being targeted by scammers. The police investigator researched Zico and discovered that he was unlicensed. Authorities intervened and retrieved the check, stopping payment before it could further harm the homeowner. After police discovered that Zico was unlicensed but posing as a licensed contractor, they arrested him and sent him to jail. Officers warned residents that others like him may still operate in the area. He wasn't shingled out. We'll leave now. Number 2. The Caretaker. Care homeowner David Barton stole millions of dollars from vulnerable residents. Barton owned Barton Park Nursing Home, located in the northwest of England. He took advantage of vulnerable residents by earning their trust, draining their bank accounts, and making himself a beneficiary in their wills. He ran his scam from 1997 and 2013, stealing $3.7 million and attempting to take an extra $12 million. Barton used the money to purchase luxury cars, including multiple Ferraris and Rolls-Royces. He even sold convertible Rolls-Royces to residents for $614,000, even though they were only worth $180,000. Barton would then offer frail residents rides in the car while holding on to them for personal use. To obtain and maintain control over his victims' finances, Barton went to great lengths, ruined their family relationships, and preferred wealthy, childless victims. He would purposefully isolate them from their loved ones, making it easier to manipulate them without outside interference. One of the couples he targeted was Mr. and Mrs. Willie. The Willies were wealthy, and Mr. Willie had Alzheimer's disease. Barton convinced them to give him their sizable classic car collection and try to get Mrs. Willie to sign over all her health to Barton and his business. Barton had purposefully separated Mrs. Willie from her friends and family to further isolate her. He went as far as to hire a life coach and psychic consultants to conjure spells that would banish their family members. Because when scamming the elderly, you've got to leave no stone unturned. After Mrs. Willie passed away, Barton claimed $12 million, which he stated was owed to him. One of his victims reported his suspicious activity to the police, prompting an extensive investigation into Barton's actions. Barton's mistreatment of residents was on full display at a hearing, revealing he threw a $6 million vase filled with water over a victim's family member in a rage. During the trial, the prosecution produced evidence such as bank statements, wills, and victim testimony. He was ultimately charged with 4 counts of conspiracy to defraud, 1 count of fraud, 3 counts of theft, false accounting, and transferring criminal property. After being found guilty, he was sentenced to 21 years in jail. The care home manager, Rosemary Booth, was also charged with 3 counts of conspiracy to defraud and sentenced to 6 years in jail. Barton's whole family also faced charges for their involvement in the scam. Lucinda, his wife, and their 2 sons, David Richard Barton and David Charles Barton, were charged with various offenses such as conspiracy to steal, false accounting, conspiracy to defraud, theft, and money laundering. How did Barton get that many people to go along with ripping off the elderly? Before we get to the last case, if you're loving these stories, be sure to stay on this video for our past release about more heartless scammers and what they did. Number 1. The fake nurse. Jesusa de Leda Jessie Lopez pretended to be a nurse and performed medical procedures without a degree at a weight loss clinic. Lopez lived in Winter Haven, Florida, where she worked at a weight loss clinic called Dr. Drop It Like It's Hot. If that's not a name that inspires confidence, we don't know what is. She worked with a licensed medical doctor and Snoop Dogg fan, Dr. S. Kamal Ashraf, MD. Despite being aware that Lopez wasn't a qualified nurse, Dr. Ashraf allowed her to perform medical procedures. Even though Lopez was unqualified, the clinic appeared to have many patients visiting daily, and there were never complaints about botched procedures or adverse outcomes from her unlicensed medical practices. Lopez was responsible for many different procedures. She would give vampire facelifts, which involved drawing blood from another part of the body, removing the plasma, and injecting it into the face. Images on social media showed her working with syringes and scalpels, and video footage revealed she was using lasers on patients. One video also showed her using a scalpel to remove a mole from a patient's neck. The clinic was located in the High Point Plaza, and employees of other businesses in the area thought the clinic was a scam due to its name. A woman that worked next door to Drop It Like It's Hot believed the name seemed like a joke, which made her skeptical about the place. Deputies in Polk County worked with the Drug Enforcement Agency and Department of Health to arrest Lopez. They charged her with 6 counts of unlicensed medical practice. Dr. Ashraf was also arrested on 1 count for employing her despite knowing she was unlicensed. Lopez reached a plea deal, but while she was out on probation, she continued to engage in illegal activities and violated her probation by opening a gym. When she returned to jail, she attempted to hire an undercover detective to go after her husband. Lopez was commenting about wanting her husband gone, catching the sheriff's office attention, who began investigating her. Investigators uncovered she was sending emails and at least 1 physical letter to the undercover detective. She requested he remove a tree from her house, for which she would pay him $2,000. Lopez instructed the detective to make it look like an attempted robbery so it couldn't be traced back to her. When Sheriff Grady Judd interviewed her about the statements and the letter, she giggled and laughed as though she was enjoying the attention. It sounds like she dropped her sanity like it was hot. She loved to steal life savings from British investors, selling them fake property she supposedly sold them. And she got evicted from her apartment, so she figured, why not run a scam on the way out? Let's get right into some of the most heartless scammers. Number 5. Not evicted. Homestead police have accused 3 people in Florida of using social media to run a real estate scam. Priscilla Mary Contreras posed as a realtor and utilized social media to lure victims to vacant homes. Her accomplices, Yodani Carrillas Diaz and Dinosaur Bravo, then pretended to be the homeowners and were in charge of the financial transactions with the victims. The trio listed the homes on Facebook Marketplace, and people interested in the properties reached out to the seller, Contreras. she greeted prospective tenants with her 2-month-old baby on her hip as she introduced herself as the real estate agent. She showed them around the properties, and then, if the potential tenants were interested, they would sign fake contracts and put down a security deposit and first and last month's rent. One of the homes that Contreras advertised was her own, although she was in the process of fighting eviction after the homeowner said that she stopped paying rent. Father of 2, Kenny, found the listing of a Miami-Dade home on Facebook and contacted Contreras for a tour. After seeing the property, he knew it would be a good place for him and his family. He paid over $5,000 for his security deposit and first and last month's rent. He also signed a lease. On their move-in day, he turned up at the house in a U-Haul, but when he got there, he found out that other families were also trying to move in that day. Maria Ura was 7 months pregnant when she found a rental property on Facebook Marketplace. Needing a home for herself and her baby, she gave the trio all her savings when she paid the move-in costs. Homestead police arrested Contreras in March 2022, who estimated that, with the help of Diaz and Bravo, scammed multiple victims out of $24,000. Priscilla turned herself into authorities in March 2022 following mounting pressure from family members. Diaz and Bravo are on the run and haven't been arrested yet. She faces multiple charges both in Homestead and Miami. They include grand theft, acting as a real estate broker without a license, unlawful communications device use, and organized schemes to defraud. Her attorney fought for her bond to be reduced due to her having a baby to care for and only having a few misdemeanors on her record. The judge ordered a bond of $28,500. Priscilla will need a Nebia hearing to ensure she doesn't use stolen money from victims to pay her bond. You may be wondering what a Nebia hearing is. A Nebia hearing is also referred to as a bail source hearing and is where a plaintiff must disclose the source of the funds used to post bail. If she can post bond after the Nebia hearing, the court will give her a GPS monitor and she'll be placed on house arrest. Number 4. Aussie Scamming. Australian businessman Chris Marco swindled $254 million out of 340 investors in a massive Ponzi scheme that lasted 16 years. He ran it through his company AMS Holdings, an unregistered investment scheme. Over those 16 years, he used the money from trusting investors for personal uses like classic cars or to purchase and maintain properties. Through his company AMS Holdings, Marco specifically targeted people who wanted to invest their retirement assets, sometimes called mom and dad investors. He lured them into working with him by flaunting his skill for tapping into international private investment programs, claiming that it would give them high returns on their investments. One of those investors was Troy Adams, who lost $400,000 through AMS Holdings. He claimed to have lost everything through the scheme, even his home and car. Another investor, Patricia Markopoulos, was scammed out of $5 million. She became Marco's family practically when she married his second cousin. After her husband suffered from a traumatic injury, Marco frequently visited the couple in the hospital. Unfortunately, her husband passed away, but she remained in contact with Marco. Marco advised her to sell her properties and give him the money to invest. He later denied these claims, but the Supreme Court of Western Australia eventually ruled that he owed Markopoulos' family $5.9 million plus interest. Marco made it no secret that he enjoyed a lavish lifestyle. He used investor funds to purchase and maintain his properties, support his party lifestyle, and fund his car collection. In 2020, his assets included his extensive collection of vintage cars, each worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. He owned a 1971 Ford Falcon XY GTH03, a 1972 Holden Torana Bathurst LJ GTR XU1, and a 1972 Chrysler Charger VHE40. In December 2020, the Perth Magistrates Court wound up AMS Holdings, Marco's unregistered investment scheme. The court also permanently restrained Marco from operating an unregistered managed investment scheme and forever denied him from having a financial services business unless he obtained an Australian financial services license. His court date was initially planned for July 22, 2022, but the court adjourned it several times and it's now scheduled for February 1st, 2023. He's charged with 50 counts of fraud, and that includes defrauding $36.5 million from 9 investors. Of the $36.5 million, he defrauded $10 million from one single investor. Each offense carries a 7-year sentence if the deceived is under 60, or a 10-year sentence if the deceived is 60 years or older. Number 3. Truffle Trees. Between 2012 and 2014, fraudsters David Austin, Susan Dalton, and Alan Barrett misled 245 people into investing £13.7 million into fake pension schemes. Each victim lost around £55,000, although that number is much higher for some people. The person credited with masterminding the entire scheme, David Austin, committed suicide in 2019 when police called him for an interview. The fraudsters persuaded pensioners to transfer their pension savings into multiple managed schemes. Victims typically transferred around £55,000, which were moved to David Austin's account, who used the money to enrich himself, fund his businesses, and pay others involved in the operation. The trio made many false promises to the victims. They told them they would receive cash bonuses, unrealistic returns, and vouchers to John Lewis, a popular high-end British department store. When the time came for David Austin to face the music, he committed suicide. Police contacted him for an interview, and after using the money for personal benefit, it was only a matter of time before the authorities would uncover his crimes. Many victims lost everything they had to the scam, leaving their lives ruined. Pauline Padden is still reeling from the experience after losing £45,000. She was drawn into the scam when she received a text that promised her higher returns on her pension and combined bonuses for transferring her pension funds. She has been a critical care nurse since she was 18, but in 2013, she spent most of her time looking after her dying mother. After being unable to make a steady income, the prospect of extra cash was too enticing to ignore. Now she's dealing with seeing friends and co-workers preparing to retire, and since she lost so much of her pension, she's unsure when she'll be able to do the same. Stephen O'Reilly's dreams of having money to leave for his children and to put towards living in Spain during his retirement were destroyed in 2013 when the trio lured him into the scam. A person he believed to be an independent government pension advisor told O'Reilly that he was getting a bad deal on his pension. So he transferred £114,000 to fix this, with no idea that he had just fallen victim to Austin, Dalton, and Barrett's elaborate scheme. The scammers made him think he had a lump sum of cash on its way, and he ordered a new car. When the cash never came, he had to borrow money from his mother. O'Reilly was devastated, having worked long hours and contributing large amounts of money to his pension, expecting it to guarantee him a comfortable retirement. In April 2022, Southwark Crown Court in London sentenced Ian Barrett and Susan Dalton to a combined total of 10 years. They pleaded guilty to fraud by abuse of position, admitted to misleading victims during their time as trustees of pension schemes. Barrett received a 5-year and 7-month sentence, and Dalton received a 4-year and 8-month sentence. The pair were banned from acting as company directors for the next 8 years. Number 2. Con for Conmac. Nassau County Police arrested financial advisors Matthew Eckstein and Kevin Brody in 2018 for running a Ponzi scheme that scammed almost 50 people out of $12 million. Their elaborate scheme targeted vulnerable victims, mainly seniors, who they duped out of their retirement savings and other finances. Brody and Eckstein encouraged clients to invest in Conmac Funding Corp., the name of Brody's company at the time. They reassured investors that their money would be protected and told some of them that the principal would be returned by Conmac Funding in 2 years with 4% interest. Eckstein lured many of the victims into the scheme, as some were existing clients for another firm he owned called Sisk Investment Services. He took advantage of his relationship with them to convince them to invest in Conmac Funding. They deceived their clients into thinking their money would be used to finance premium insurance loans. Eckstein told others they were putting down a certificate deposit that would receive a guaranteed interest rate. Once victims had invested, they were given a username and password for Conmac's website to see their account statements and growing balances. Victims then believed that their money was gaining interest with the company. They were unaware that the portal they were accessing was bogus, and instead of investing in Conmac Funding, their money was going directly to Eckstein and Brody. The pair used the money to fund their other enterprises, from personal expenses, paying other scheme victims, to investing in hamburger restaurants. Eckstein used some of the funds for the down payment on his elaborate home, which had a tennis court and swimming pool. The Nassau County District Attorney opened an investigation into Eckstein and Brody's business practices after an elderly victim reported them to officials. Eckstein was the victim's financial advisor and personal accountant and invested $385,000 into Conmac Funding. He told her the investment was safe and misled her into thinking she had no reason to worry. Eckstein also made the victim believe that she would get her money back in 2 years, and by that point, it would have accrued substantial interest. 2 years passed, and when the victim requested the money, the company only sent her $26,999. It was a small percentage of her original $385,000 investment. Eckstein claimed she would receive the money in installments. Conmac Funding only sent one payment. She reached out to him repeatedly, but he stopped answering her calls. And in 2017, she told officials what happened. One of Eckstein's biggest mistakes was that he used the Postal Service as part of his scheme, which led Postal Service inspectors to investigate his business practices. The Postal Inspection Service worked with the FBI and the New York State Comptroller's Office, executed a search warrant into Eckstein's home office where they found thousands of financial documents. The NCDA had enough information to arrest Eckstein in June 2018, but they were only aware of roughly 14 people he had victimized. Following his arrest, they discovered 26 more people that he had conned in the same scheme. A total of 40 victims came forward, which prompted the NCDA to upgrade his charges. They also had enough evidence to arrest Brody in connection with the scheme. Eckstein was charged with grand larceny in the first degree and conspiracy in the fourth degree. He pleaded guilty in September 2019. However, he later withdrew that plea. But then, in a new indictment against him, he pleaded guilty again. The Nassau County District Attorney sentenced him to 10 years in prison. His house is also now in foreclosure. Brody was charged with grand larceny in the second degree and conspiracy in the fourth degree and was sentenced to 7 years in prison. In October 2019, Nassau County District Attorney Manraj Singh announced that the majority of the victims received roughly $5.6 million in restitution. Number 1. Turkish Properties. Haley Brown, a British con woman, scammed hundreds of thousands of pounds in a Turkish property scam that targeted business investors. Victims paid large amounts of money to Haley, with one of them losing £600,000 to the scam. Between 2006 and 2009, she conned people out of more than $1.2 million. Brown was arrested in November 2009 in connection with this scam, but it wasn't the first time she faced prison charges. She served 5 years in prison for 2 counts of firearm offenses, where she disguised a taser into looking like a mobile phone and possessed a canister of CS-type gas, which is a prohibited weapon in the UK. Brown's elaborate scheme involved enticing investors into buying low-cost homes in Turkey. She invited them to Turkey so they could tour the properties and paid for them to stay in expensive hotels. She told them that people were occupying the property, so it wouldn't be possible to tour them. Victims felt that this made their investment safer since all the units they were shown were filled. She instructed victims to pay her, and then she would buy the properties in their name. The terms of the purchase were that they would receive rental income, and in 3 years, they'd either be able to renew the arrangement, sell the property, or continue to rent them out. However, the rent investors received was irregular, and they never received the returns Brown promised. She gave them excuses to explain why the money they received wasn't what she promised. Victims were rapidly losing money and asked her to sell the properties. She showed them forged official documents and fake bank statements to show that she had received the money and would pass it on soon. She also forged emails between her and her bank officials where they discussed the transfers of these large sums of money. Rather than investing victims' money into property, Brown put it towards personal expenses. She used the money to fund her lifestyle instead of allowing the victims to let it improve their own lives. She stole £1.5 million, but the court discovered that her only assets equaled £56,846 during a confiscation hearing. Those assets included a Chanel watch that cost $6,000, a Rolex watch that cost £5,000, and £45,000 that were in hidden assets. During the trial, when Judge Guy Curl asked about what happened to the rest of the money, prospector Paul Reed informed the court that none was left. The bank repossessed her home, and when they went inside, they found many counterfeit clothes that the judge ordered to be destroyed. Judge Keel ordered Brown to pay £56,846 to avoid additional prison time due to his default. He planned on turning the money into total compensation payments that they would give to the victims, which would still be a fraction of the money they lost. Later, the victims learned that she never had permission to work in Turkey and never paid taxes there. No properties were registered in her name in Turkey either, making it clear that the documents she produced were all false. Leeds Crown Court charged her with 10 offenses of fraud, 2 of using a false document with the intent to deceive, and 3 of obtaining a money transfer by deception. She denied all of the charges. In 2014, she was sentenced to 4 years in prison. Click to watch one of these next videos. Let us know in the comments section below what you think is the easier scam to fall for, a crypto scam or a romance scam.